People that walked in on their so having sex with another person, how did you react? Girlfriend had been feeling sick the past few days. It was a slow day at my part-time job, so my manager decided to let a coworker and I off early. Decided to surprise her with soup and a Redbox movie I picked up when I was heading out. The shower was running when I got there, so I warmed the soup up and sent her a text telling her I was downstairs with a surprise. While preparing it all, I heard a very distinguishable voice yell out in joy. That voice belonged to a pretty good friend of ours. Each step up the stairs boiled more anger, but finally seeing it with my eyes only brought disappointment. 8 months destroyed in 8 seconds. The amount of time she apologized and told me it's never happened before this didn't matter. I won't lie. It f***ed me up. I'm still dealing with trust issues and anxiety from it all. First met my wife when I was studying abroad in China. We dated briefly over there and kept in touch online when I returned home. Eventually, the two of us got married and she moved out here to the States with me. Occasionally her family comes to visit. 4 years into the relationship, I catch her with her brother in bed. I didn't know what the f*** to think. Is this a weird cultural thing? Is this guy even her brother? I got angry, yelled at her, stormed out for the night, and crashed at my friend's apartment. I went to work, came back home when she was at school, and the guy was gone. I go through her MacBook. Her Skype and email were saved. I find out the guy was her husband. The money we were sending to help her parents was being sent to this guy and her kids. We're since divorced. I haven't dated in years. I'm struggling with major self-esteem issues. No, I'm better off without her. But I miss the feeling of being in love and having a sense of belonging. I vomited. It felt like it happened even before it registered what I had seen. It caught me totally by surprise. No suspicions. No sounds coming through the door. I was walking towards the door, looked in the window as I passed, suddenly vomited in the grass. As I'm heaving, it slowly sinks in what I saw. I can't believe it. Totally caught me by surprise. I walk down the street to give myself some room to breathe. I sit down on the curb wanting to cry or something. I couldn't decide if I was devastated or furious. I sat there for hours. It wasn't my girlfriend, but I was there. I was out with a few buddies and was designated driver. I had just dropped off 2 guys and was driving my other quite inebriated friend home. We live about 2 minutes from each other walking distance, and he says, "Dude, you should come in and I'll sort you out some tequila." I had never done tequila and this had been a thing for a while. So I said, "Yeah, let's do it." We walk in through the hallway and open the door to the front room. We see his housemate under a girl on the sofa. I had to take a double take. But yep, it was my buddy's girlfriend. We're both staring at this situation. The girlfriend stares at my buddy and immediately starts crying. I grab my buddy and start taking him back towards the front door. He's in that kind of sobered up immediately sort of shock. I look back to see the girl with her hands on her face crying heavy and the housemate looking really weirded out. I took my buddy back to my place in my car with him fighting consciousness. Or at least pretending to, so he doesn't have to admit what he saw. The next morning, my buddy is passed out in my room. I stayed downstairs on the sofa just in case he decided to get up and go do something stupid in a drunken rage. He didn't, but I thought better safe. The next morning, he's still in shock from it all. His phone is blowing up left, right, and center with texts and calls. I've had a few texts too with her asking my address to come over, etc. They had been together since early secondary school, i.e., since 15 years old. They'd already discussed staying together for life, as in when they would graduate. They would work for X years. They'd get married, have kids, set for life kind of shit. He looked utterly smashed. Anyway, there is a good part. He did the right thing. He moved out away from his housemate and stopped in with me for the rest of the year. He didn't even acknowledge her when they passed each other a couple of weeks later. She tried to make out to mutual friends like he was already cheating, but couldn't back it up with facts. In return, he quite happily told everyone exactly how and where he had caught her. Of course, she made out like he was abusive and psychologically manipulative, but by then her credit was totally trashed. Sure, she had her bestie male friends who sided with her totally, but really they only wanted to f*** her too. Anyway, a few weeks later he's drowning his sorrows again one night. He's all broken about how she threw him away and how his housemate was a bastard. I just said, look at it from your ex-housemate's perspective. Just imagine it. No matter how you shake it, he had a girl on top of him in the throes of utter devastation and crying hysterically. All of this while he's still inside her. Yep. For life. He's going to know what it's like to have a girl self-destruct while he's up in her. Dude. Sex for him is ruined for life. We both laughed a lot and it was all fun and games after that. Thankfully it was only a girlfriend. Anyways, we lived together. And I got released early military at the time and came home. Caught her in the act. And honestly I think it was the dude's reaction that kept me calmer than anything. He started yelling at her, "Who the f is this guy? And you said you were single." She had lied through her teeth to the guy, and to be honest, I've never been one to hang pictures or anything, or to live like a slob, so it is fairly believable he didn't know a guy lived there. Anyways, I just started packing my stuff, and she tried to yell at me, and cuss at me and stop me from packing. She tried to take stuff from me, and dumped my bags, and I just kept my head down and kept packing away. Honestly, I think I took it the best way I could. There was other stuff like quickly contacting the landlord, and informing him I was moving out at will tenant in a month-to-month lease and getting out of there the next day. But my reaction was the only sensible thing I could do at the time, I think. Military wives give other military wives a bad name. We'd been dating for over a year. She'd gotten a new job, and to congratulate her I left work early and brought over 2 bottles of champagne. No one was answering the door, but her roommate was in the stairwell outside their friend's apartment and heard me knocking. She let me in. We both walked together to their room at the end of the hall, and as her roommate pushed the door open, my so called out not to come in, and I heard laughing. At this point, I moved on a kind of numb autopilot and pushed the door open. She was on top of him. She threw the blanket over her shoulders and looked back toward the door. I honestly lost my shit. I cried, screamed, went to absolute pieces. I knew the guy from other friends, and he'd abandoned a close friend of mine after their daughter was born severely epileptic. She wasn't apologetic at all. They were in love. I drove home, bawling the whole way. I haven't loved anyone like I loved her yet in my life. I drank both bottles of champagne at my apartment and packed a bag, calling my family to pick me up. I spent a few days with them. Being back home reminded me of the actual, unconditional love in my life. She and the guy deserved each other. In the end, she called me almost a year later while she was living with him and wanted to come over. She wanted to have sex, so we did. Then I detailed the whole affair in a message to him, and he kicked her out of his house. Everything works out in the end, people. I was on a trip and decided to come home a couple days early and surprise my now ex-fiancé. We were not living together, so I was going to go to my apartment to shower because I took a red-eye flight and I wanted to wash off the airplane stink before I surprised her with some flowers. I walk in and I see a pair of shoes by the door that were not mine. I thought maybe they were my roommate's. As I round the corner to my room, I start to hear moaning and heavy breathing. I thought my roommate was in my room, so I thought I would with him. I burst through the door and said something like surprise and find my fiancé getting by her roommate. I guess their other roommate had people over, so they thought to go to my place, which they thought was empty. I looked at them and I think you should leave the ring and the key. They freaked out and asked what I was doing home. I told them that this is my place and I didn't have to answer to them. They scrambled to collect their shit and leave. In the process, she left behind her iPad. I decided to go through it. I'm really proud of that, but I figured, why not? The wedding is off now anyway. Turns out she had been sleeping with a bunch of different people for the past 6 or 7 months. Sounds like you were really lucky to have discovered that she was a cheater before you got married. I'll never understand why people who cannot be monogamous get married. Coming from a guy who found out he married a big cheater not quite 2 years into the deal. Congratulations. The bullet you dodged is quite a heavy caliber. Walked in on my ex after 3 years together with one of my best friends at the time. Took a double take and just stood there for what couldn't have been more than 5 seconds. I then just drove back to my dorm and literally lost my shit for a minute. I've never been one to actually be out of control of my temper. But at the time, all the emotions overwhelmed me as I fell out of shock. I will never forget that moment that I felt that I had no control over myself. It was both frightening and relieving. Well, I walked in on them sleeping in our bed. I came home early from a road trip with a friend of mine and walked into my bedroom, happy to wake her up and surprise her. For whatever reason, the guy had a Polaroid in the bedside table, so I took a picture, set it next to them basically to say be glad I didn't kill you, and walked out. She tried justifying it later, but I think I barely said 10 words to her after that. Dude, the Polaroid thing. That is brilliant. She must have been freaked out beyond belief when she woke up to that. Punched a wall that turned out to be a support column and broke my hand in 2 places. Not the brightest response. If I could do it all again, I would have just walked away and stayed away. Punched a wall that turned out to be a support column. Was really hoping that the building was going to crumble around you like a scene out of the Hulk or some shit. I didn't say anything. Just walked in and she said the typical, "It's not what you think." I just walked out and haven't spoken to her in over 6 months. I don't even miss her. It's nice to say that and actually mean it. Sadness. Wasn't as angry as I thought I would be. I had suspicions beforehand. We had been together for a year. She started getting distant about a month ago. Walked in on them last night. It is what it is. But there's a massive hole in my heart now. I wanted to surprise him on his birthday, so I came with some of our friends to his dorm, bringing gifts and birthday cake. When I opened the door using the spare key he gave me, there he was, balls deep in a girl he brought home from club. We just kind of stared at them in shock and they stared back, also in shock. And then we all left without a word, dumping all the gifts and cake onto his floor. He hasn't won any of his friends back ever since.